Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our presentation on Weyside Urban Village. My name is Joanna Christofides, and I'm here on behalf of Curtin & Co, and we are supporting the project team with these proposals. This is the 6th online exhibition we are holding, but I appreciate that for some attendees, this platform may be new and not something you're used to. And so we thought it would be helpful in the first few slides to explain how the platform works before we move on to the presentation. You should be able to see the slides in front of you, and on the right-hand side, there's an icon which you can press to go into full screen mode, which allows you to see the presentation much more clearly. The next screen explains how you can ask a question, and we would like as many questions as possible because we're holding a Q&A after the presentation. Those questions we don't cover will be answered separately. So you will see there is a question icon on the right-hand side, so please click on that and type in your question. The third thing is the actual material that we are presenting, which is available to download by clicking the icon indicated. Finally, at the end of this presentation, there's a short feedback form, and we'd be very grateful if you could complete this. It should only take a couple of minutes. So, in this evening's exhibition, we will update you on the following: our emerging proposals for Weyside Urban Village and the changes we've made, parameter plans covering land use, green infrastructure, building heights, access and movement, infrastructure and services, measures to mitigate the impact on local roads, the suitable alternative natural green space or SANG. The team will also be holding a live Q&A, as I said, where we seek to answer as many as of your questions and concerns. In the consultation to date, we've had over 5,500 visits to our project website. We've held 5 online public exhibitions. This is the 6th, as I said, with a further one to come in November. Over 402 people have registered to view the exhibitions, and 236 people have attended them. 379 questions have been asked to date, and over 100 completed feedback forms have been given back to the project team. In the consultation to date, you've raised the following questions, which we will seek to answer this evening. Under highways and transport, you've expressed concerns on increased traffic and congestion. You've talked about opportunities for sustainable transport, the overspilling of parking onto local roads, concerns of site access, working road entrance to be open for residential access, the impact of construction traffic on existing residents and connectivity. On design, we've talked about the quality of design, the level of detail that will be going into the design code, building heights, sustainability including energy efficiency of home and sustainable transport, and affordable housing for local people. Under employment, we've discussed support for office use or flexible work spaces, adapting to post-COVID work patterns. Under landscape and ecology, we've talked about the impact on the Riverway and Stoke Lock, impact on flood levels, new SANG and biodiversity and ecology, and the relocation of the allotment site. And finally, under community and leisure facilities, we've discussed improvements to existing facilities. I'll now hand you over to Sarah Bouden, the planning consultant for the project.
Thanks, Joanna. So, good evening. I'm Sarah Bouden from Savills, appointed as planning consultants for the project. I wanted to briefly recap on what we will be seeking planning permission for and what will be included in the planning application, which will be submitted at the end of November. Firstly, I should say that a lot of work has gone in behind the scenes to prepare for the planning application, including technical assessments and amendments to take into account comments received through the pre-application consultation process. If you attended the consultation back in the summer, you would have heard me refer to this project as a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, in that there's various pieces that need to fit together to enable the scheme to work. The red line shown here identifies the Slyfield regeneration area. So to enable the site to be redeveloped, new locations have had to be found for sewage treatment works, which is currently located in the southern part of the site, and we will be relocated to the north. The waste recycling centre, currently located in the eastern end of Moorfield Road, will also be relocated to the north. New locations have also been found for the allotments and for the council depot. The replacement allotments already have planning permission, However, you may be aware that the Secretary of State issued its decision on the relocation of the allotments, and options are being considered in light of this. Thames Water and Surrey County Council will submit planning applications for the new sewage treatment works and new waste recycling centre respectively, not retrospectively. By moving these uses from their existing locations, this enables the site to be redeveloped to create a new community in line with adopted local planning policy, which establishes this as an acceptable location for a mixed-use, residentially led development. Planning permission for the new community will be sought through submitting what is referred to as a hybrid planning application, in that outline planning permission will be sought for the majority of the development, with full planning permission sought for specific elements. Outline planning permission will establish the amount and type of development that can be built on the site through the approval of parameter plans that will show where the different land uses such as residential, community uses, retail and employment uses will go on the site, as well as key landscape elements, strategic roads and key movement corridors. The outline planning permission will also secure key contributions that the scheme will make, such as a policy compliant level of affordable housing, which will be provided as part of the scheme. Full planning permission will be sought for key infrastructure elements to enable the early phases of development to come forward after planning permission has been granted. This will enable the appropriate remediation to take place and for the key access points to be built. After planning permission has been granted, detailed applications or reserved matters applications can come forward for the various phases of the scheme. These will need to be in accordance with the outline planning permission and the approved parameters for the scheme, which JTP will run through in their presentation after myself. They will also have to be in accordance with an approved design code for the scheme, which will ensure the quality of housing and building design remains high and consistent across the whole site, which is likely to be delivered over a 10 to 15 year period. So between now and submission, we will continue to review all consultation responses received, complete our technical assessments, continue pre-application discussions with Guildford Borough Council, review on-site and off-site measures to create a pleasant environment and minimise impacts of development, and prepare those parameter plans and an illustrated master plan for approval by Guildford Borough Council. So to finish, I will now hand over to Rebecca Taylor from JTP, who will highlight the key amendments that have been made to the master plan, as well as the key parameter plans for the scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I'm an architect and master planner at JTP. So we showed you some of the emerging proposals for the sort of concept master plan at our last event, and I wanted to take you through some of the amendments we've made since then, taking on board some of the comments raised, and obviously also in further dialogue with Guildford Borough Council. So we've set out 7 principal amendments and evolutions of the proposals that you can see on the drawing here. So the first, number 1, is at the Woking Road entrance to the new neighbourhood, where we now have an additional vehicular access, where previously this was a bus only access into the neighbourhood. So we now have this as a vehicular access as well. The second, number 2, is a proposal where we've been working closely with the existing primary school to deliver them a new access and drop-off area to the east of their site, which then also relates to the green area, the new landscaped area that you can see just above the number 2, and helps to create a really strong sense of arrival and a landscape-led approach to the entrance in that location. Number 3, we've been working to establish a new position for a river crossing for cyclists and pedestrians to create a strong link to the Sang, which was referred to earlier on. And you can see the location where we're exploring for that potential new bridge to come forward at number 3. Number 4 refers to a range of different things we've been exploring off-site, sort of beyond the red line, to make improvements to the existing community, and in particular the play spaces in the Weyfield neighbourhood. And here this has been in relation to the multi-use games area off Waterside Road. Number 5 at the bottom of the drawing there relates to the existing pump house building, which, as we mentioned previously, we are looking to retain, and we've been exploring community uses that might come forward in that pump house building. Number 6 relates to the frontage to the river along the length of the site, and we've been testing different scenarios for the kinds of buildings, and in particular the heights of buildings that might go along there. And our proposals, and I'll take you through the heights drawing in a moment, are now showing townhouses along that riverfront, so setting any buildings that might be taller than that further back from the riverfront to create that really sensitive edge along the river corridor. And then number 7 refers to those taller buildings which we're positioning purposefully along the sustainable movement corridor, where we have set a height limit of no taller than 6 stories within the centre of the site there. Next, please. So as Sarah has mentioned, the outline planning application will consist of a set of drawings which are called parameter plans, and I'll take you through this suite of drawings now. The first being the land use parameter plan, which sets out, and hopefully you can see in the key there, the different land uses that will come forward at Weyside Urban Village and how we seek to categorise those and determine the locations of those. So the yellow parcels being the residential areas, which will also include the internal circulation to those and parking areas and small areas of landscape as well. The mixed uses are shown in the dark red, which is around the local centre and the piece of public realm that we're calling a public square within the heart of the scheme there. And then up to the north, we have new employment uses in blue and the new GBC depot shown also in the paler blue. We have the Gypsy Traveller site, and then of course key areas of landscape and open space shown in green, which are controlled and captured within the land use parameter plan here. Next, please. The second parameter plan is the green infrastructure, which refers to all the key pieces of landscape, be those public open space and ranging from natural green space through to play areas and of course areas of growing and allotments, and we've turned here community orchard. So you can see those all in the key, and they are set out within this parameter plan to ensure that the right quantities of landscape and public realm are delivered and that the characters of those are in keeping what's then set out in the design code. Also here we indicate locations for sustainable urban drainage or SUDS features, which you can see in the blue hatches, and also indicative locations for play areas, which is the NEAP and the LEAP. So these are equipped areas of play positioned across the proposals to make sure that the development delivers enough play space for the new residents. And the little orange star is indicating the location for community gardens and growing areas. Next, please. This drawing then brings together our proposals in relation to building heights. So this is the building heights parameter plan, and you can see in the colour key ranging from single storey up to the 5 to 6 stories, which I identified on the previous drawing. The darker colours then being the tallest buildings set back from the river and also set back from the existing residential edges, where purposefully heights are reduced and brought down to ensure a really sensitive relationship with the existing properties that back onto and side onto the site boundary as it stands at the moment. So 2 to 3 story development along those edges, rising up to a maximum of 5 to 6 within the centre of the site along the sustainable movement corridor. Next, please. We then have our access and movement plan, which sets out the key movement corridors across the proposals. So the blue being the sustainable movement corridor, running through from north to south through the new neighbourhood. And the blue arrow at the top is where we have a bus-only access to the employment and Gypsy Traveller site, and then the bus route all the way through the neighbourhood. And then the other vehicular access, as you can see with the 2 orange arrows, from Belfields Road and Slyfield Green, and then from the Woking Road entrance towards the south with the purple arrow. The green dash lines indicate the network of footpaths and cycle routes which will crisscross over the site and of course run along a new length of towpath along the river. The red arrow indicates the potential location for the new bridge. Next, please. And I'll hand over to Stuart at this point.
Thank you very much. Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Stuart Guarneri. I'm from ACOM. I'm here to talk to you about what we're planning at Weyside in terms of infrastructure. I'd first like to thank those of you who joined the previous infrastructure public exhibition and left comments and questions. They were most appreciated, very useful, and we have taken them on board where we can. So, excuse me, the two most important facets of infrastructure on this project are sustainability and infrastructure for the future. Without 21st century infrastructure, this development can't progress, and it's our responsibility to make sure we install everything we need to make this a development for the future. So this development is proposed to be sustainable and self-sufficient in terms of utility infrastructure, ensuring that the demands we require from the local networks do not cause any ill effects on existing Guildford residents. It's a well-known issue in the Guildford area that the current power grid provision is at or over capacity, and since our last exhibition, discussions have moved forward with UK Power Networks regarding constructing a new primary substation on this development and performing upgrades to other power infrastructure to ensure we have plenty of power for what we need to accomplish it in terms of domestic supplies and electric vehicle charging. Electricity provision is very important. For those of you who were in attendance last time round, you'll recall that we are proposing a development with no gas supplies. This is for two reasons. Firstly, emerging policy from central government is that by 2025, gas for heating in new residential developments will not be permitted. And secondly, because going gasless is better for the environment and much more sustainable, as the recent pushes into green energy generation in the national grid means that electricity is now more carbon friendly than gas. And this decarbonisation is only going to improve in the future, meaning that the carbon footprint of electricity will continue to fall relative to gas supplies. So taking all that into account, it is proposed that all residential property heating needs will be met using a form of energy efficient electrical heating. If you recall, in the last presentation, I mentioned air source heat pumps as an efficient way of heating a property and one that we're basing our electrical calculations on. Now, it's important to stress that we are not ruling any technology out, nor championing air source as the technology to take forward. It's one of a myriad of technologies that fits the bill, along with ground source pumps, thermal stores, solar, photovoltaics, all of which will be encouraged through the emerging residential design guides and codes that the future residential developers will be required to abide by. And of course, there may be new technologies that come to market in the future which also fit the bill, and they will be encouraged too. But from my perspective as the infrastructure lead, the overriding concern is ensuring that we install the correct infrastructure for the future to allow maximum sustainable flexibility on plot, hence the upgrading of the local power grid. It's also worth mentioning that those design codes are not just focused on sustainable heating, far from it. They will encourage exemplar sustainable development as a whole, containing sections on energy efficiency, building fabric design, insulation, water management, recycling, all of that sort of good stuff. When it comes to telecoms and communications, the ongoing COVID pandemic has shown just how important having fast, stable broadband is, and so fast fibre to the home is a cornerstone of this development. The telecom strategy is still emerging, but discussions are progressing with the national providers like BT Openreach and Virgin Media, and also more local residential and commercial providers. We're also looking to link the development up to the wider fibre improvements in the local Guildford area and are in dialogue with local providers, including Broadband for Surrey Hills. The current utility strategy, in fact, includes a dedicated bank of network ducts across the entire development purely for future private and local fibre companies to use to ensure that we achieve the best mix of fast fibre to the home. Moving on to drainage, and it has been touched on so far, the whole principle of the drainage on this development is the use of sustainable urban drainage systems, or SUDs. SUDs are a way of capturing, storing, cleansing and releasing surface water into the local watercourses in a way that mimics that of a green field rather than into a traditional gravity pipe network. And it works via a chain of different elements such as swales, engineered ditches, retention tanks and detention ponds. The principle is to ensure that the increase in hard areas like roads and buildings do not speed up the volumes of water entering the River Wey, and that the site will drain as it does now. The network across the site has been fully designed to accommodate the most onerous storm intensities, with full allowance for climate change increasing these intensities further. And aside from slowing water flows to not affect the River Wey, these systems have other benefits such as increased green areas, amenity, biodiversity and pollution control. The planting of reeds and the like in the swales and ponds naturally absorb pollutants from the highways, cleansing the water and ensuring there's no impact to the water quality of the river. The network has also been spatially planned on the development site to use the routes that all the existing subsurface drainage takes, creating green corridors through the development in areas that would otherwise be empty due to the infrastructure below. The planning application will be accompanied by a detailed flood risk assessment, which will explain how we are mitigating against development in the various flood zones through site levels design to ensure the development is protected against the climate change flooding parameters. Finally, we have undertaken an extensive series of geotechnical and geo-environmental investigations across the site in order to determine the levels of contamination present, given the site's previous and current uses, as well as other ground parameters necessary for the design of structural foundations and road pavements to ensure things don't subside and they get the life that they're meant to have. The on-site testing is now complete and the samples have been sent to the laboratory for chemical analysis. Although the lab work is still underway, the preliminary results suggest that the levels of contamination are as expected for a site such as this, and a robust remediation and decontamination strategy is being worked up for planning to address anything in the ground that needs to be cleaned up to ensure that the site is remediated to a level suitable for its future uses. Okay, that's all from me, so thanks for listening. If you have any infrastructure questions, please leave them in the comments section. I will now hand over to Matt to discuss transport matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt from Markides Associates. So I would now like to take you through some of the updates, follow-on work we've done on the transport elements of the project since the last consultation events. These slides are meant as an update upon what we presented last time, and previously presented information can be found on the website. As Rebecca has already referenced, we have firstly made changes to the site's access strategy, taking your feedback on board from the last events. We have now decided to open up the southern access into the site from Woking Road to general traffic, as well as buses, cyclists and pedestrians as before. Yeah, indicated by the number 1 on the screen. By opening up this access, we will reduce the volume and impact of vehicle movements using the residential access points 2 and 3 along Belfields Road, Woodlands Road and Slyfield Green. This change has been made as a direct result of the feedback that you gave us last time. The access point into the new industrial area at the northmost point of the site, which is indicated by point 4, remains unchanged and is open to general traffic accessing the industrial areas, as well as buses, cyclists and pedestrians. Thank you. Next, please. We received a number of questions from you last time about the sustainable movement corridor, the main route that travels north-south through the site, and how it's going to look. So hopefully this slide will help answer those questions. This picture, which is shown on the right-hand side, at the top provides a cross-section of the main road corridor through the site, and the bottom provides a top-down view of how it will look. So as you can see from the drawing, there will be a sufficiently wide road carriageway of 6.75 metres to accommodate both private vehicle movements and the new bus route. In keeping with the ambition to encourage sustainable travel, there will also be a segregated 3.5 metre bi-directional cycle route running alongside the road, as well as footpaths either side of the route, which will be surrounded by trees and landscaping as shown on the image. As a reminder, this route will continue right the way through the site, from the southern entrance onto Woking Road, right up to the Slyfield Industrial Estate and Moorfield Road. Thank you. Next, please. At the previous Highways and Transport consultation event, we explained the process we've taken to understand traffic generated by the site and its impact on nearby junctions along Woking Road. To be clear that despite significant sustainable transport enhancing proposals that we are putting forward, we have been robust in our assessment of potential future traffic. And for the purposes of these junction designs, we've taken a worst case scenario of traffic generation which has been checked and confirmed by Surrey County Council officers. This means that the designs we are putting forward will suitably accommodate future traffic needs. In the example junction improvements shown on the screen now, so the junction which is Moorfield Road and Woking Road, we have created a much longer southbound dual carriageway section north of the junction. We've also widened the two northbound lanes approaching the junction. This will make it easier for traffic to progress, particularly when you've got vehicles queuing to turn right. And we've added a new southbound lane on the exit of the junction towards Woodlands Road. All of these changes at this location mean that even when including natural growth rates in traffic between now and when the development is finished in 2033, plus all of the new development related traffic on top of that, this junction will perform as well as it did, if not better than it did in 2014 in terms of traffic capacity and of queuing, i.e. it will perform better than it currently does at the moment with these improvements. Thank you. Next, please. This is just another example of the junctions, or two junctions, in fact, that we will be providing improvements to. So further south along Woking Road, where it meets the off-slip junction with the A3, and just south of that, the junction between Woking Road, the A25 and Stoke Road, we are proposing improvements that will ultimately benefit all road users, so general traffic, cyclists and pedestrians. We have identified inefficiencies in the current traffic light design and timings, which can be addressed through upgrading the traffic lights. This alone has the opportunity to fairly dramatically improve the operation of these junctions, reduce delays and reduce queuing on approach, particularly queuing southbound along Woking Road and queuing from the A3 off-slip. We've also identified that travelling in a northbound direction, where there are currently 3 lanes of traffic, the middle lane is very underutilised. Therefore, you'll see in these two options in front of you, we have repurposed this lane by offering a wider, improved footpath, as shown in the 2 options. Both options, therefore, have a footpath on the eastern side of the road, which is between 4 to 5 metres wide, considerably wider than existing, which will allow for pedestrians and cyclists to efficiently and effectively share the route, similar to the route along the A25 by Guildford Spectrum. We are currently exploring options of how to treat the pedestrian crossing over the A3 off-slip, which is what these 2 options are between option 1 and option 2, considering what is best and balanced for all road users. However, regardless of which of these options we deliver, it is clear that we could improve the safety and quality of environment for pedestrians and cyclists at this busy traffic location, encouraging more sustainable travel from Weyfields and from the new Weyside development, all whilst improving traffic capacity through traffic signal enhancements. These are not the only locations that we're proposing junction improvements. We are also bringing forward plans to improve the junctions of Woodlands Road and Belfields Road, along the main junctions of those along with on Woking Road. And we will look to present those to you in the next consultation event in 2 weeks' time. Thank you. Next, please. In addition to more traffic or junction improvements, we are also looking to deliver a range of wider cycling benefits to encourage both new and existing residents to cycle more. So we have developed this range of proposals, consulting a wide range of stakeholders, including the County Council, local council officers, and the Guildford Bike User Group. All of the improvements shown on the screen improve cycle safety and accessibility. Our plans also link up with wider cycle improvement proposals for Guildford Town Centre, the new College Link, and the new cycle lanes along London Road, which are currently being proposed by Surrey County Council. So our proposals on the screen include a new segregated cycle route through the Weyside Urban Village site, as shown along the Sustainable Movement Corridor, a new river crossing and connection to the National Cycle Route 223, a new cycle route connection from the Sustainable Movement Corridor into the existing residential areas, and a new cycle-friendly crossing over Woking Road to link up the Riverway towpaths. Thank you. Next, please. We'll also be providing a new cycle route and footpath connections from the Weyside Urban Village site into the SANG, or as its full title, the Sustainable Alternative Natural Green Space, essentially a new nature reserve. So this new nature reserve, which will be created to both the south and the north of Clay Lane, will have a circular walking route and a new cycle route connecting the sites, the Weyside Urban Village site's segregated cycle routes to Clay Lane and to Jacobswell. This will allow residents of Jacobswell the option of a traffic-free cycle route all the way to Guildford Spectrum, to Stoke Park and toward the town centre. Thank you. Next, please. So we presented last time a range of travel plan measures we would like to introduce, and we think will help provide suitable and sustainable alternatives to travelling by car. We asked you for your feedback on these measures, and very pleased to say that you gave the following measures some support. So the measures we are looking to take forward with your support include the new cycle facilities, including cycle parking, cycle maintenance areas, and the provision for cycle hire facilities in the future. Car club bays that will be available for use by existing and new residents. Bus tokens, which will offer residents a discount to encourage and embed new bus users. Plus, also vehicle charging points, a car sharing database scheme, and the hiring of a travel plan coordinator who will be responsible for encouraging and promoting sustainable travel use. All of these measures will help to reduce car traffic and will create a more sustainable and healthier place to live and to work. Next, please. So we previously held a consultation event for local residents and neighbours of the site to discuss kind of localised improvements to their streets. We asked a number of questions as to what you would like, and have been provided with some excellent feedback, which we've been able to incorporate into our proposals. So thank you for all of that feedback. The local road changes presented on the screen are by no means an exhaustive list, but they cover the main improvements we are now proposing. On Belfields Road, which is shown on the image to the right, we'll be providing an additional residential parking area using land from the new site. This is to ensure that road users, the road can accommodate existing parking needs and the new residential traffic that will be using the road. We will also be adding a new drop-off car park and school gate at the Weyfield Primary School. This will improve both safety, principally for pupils and for pedestrians. On Woodland Road and Slyfield Green, we are looking to bring forward proposals to restrict existing parking to residents only, either through yellow lines or through a parking permit scheme. This is due to feedback that you've given us in the last consultation events, which said industrial estate parking is a problem on these roads. Local residents also responded positively to our proposals to introduce a new small one-way configuration around the former Parrots pub, and we'll be taking this idea forward. So this allows traffic to flow better on the current narrow roads in that particular location. And finally, we are also looking to install 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions throughout the site. Your feedback from last time said that you would like to see this be extended into the nearby residential streets. That is again something we will look to provide. Thank you. Next, please. So in addition to all of the measures that we've already outlined, we're also pursuing the following additional improvements. So a new bus route. So this new bus route would be a frequent and reliable connection from the site to Guildford Town Centre and the Central Train Station. We will also embed a mobility hub within the proposed new local centre. The mobility hub essentially will integrate the various local travel plan measures that previously discussed, along with the new bus stop and with things like Amazon-style delivery lockers. This will help encourage interaction between all these kind of sustainability promoting measures. We've also been in discussions with the National Trust about providing a new pedestrian and cyclist crossing point over the Riverway. This will provide an enhanced connection with places like Guildford Spectrum, the Riverside Nature Reserve, and into existing areas within Burpham. Next slide, please. So just to, I wanted to really conclude the transport section of the presentation by ultimately reassuring you that this is not the last consultation event, nor is it the last opportunity for you to have your say on these proposals. As a part of the planning application, we'll be submitting detailed reports, including all of the traffic analysis, all the detailed numbers, the junction designs, and it will be available for all of you to access. This will include information on construction. I know this is something that some of you have raised from the last time. So the likely construction routes, the number of vehicles that might be accessing the site per day. All of this data is still being developed and it's not quite ready yet, and we will make it available as soon as it's complete. Then, if the application is approved, we'll be required to meet a range of conditions before the highway improvements are even carried out. And these conditions often involve and will involve further consultation processes with local residents and stakeholders. And we'll go through those consultation processes as each of the local highway improvements is designed in detail. I think that is everything from me. So I'll now hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Smith and I'm the landscape architect with Bradley Murphy Design working on this project. First of all, similar to previous comments, thank you for all of the feedback that we've been given so far. It's really helped shape our proposals and shape our thinking on the way forward with the landscape design. As a recap, we are very much pushing this master plan as a nature-led master plan, with the protection and conservation of the Riverway corridor as a priority. A broad green buffer is proposed and utilised for new pedestrian and riverside routes and a new experience along the riverside. Of course, this needs to integrate safe movement and preserving the river edge environment. Also important that we provide new green links to the riverside from existing residential areas. Thank you. Next slide, please. It's important to say that the landscape plans that you will be seeing shortly are illustrative and are an idea of how the landscape design could be formed based on the parameter plans that were shown earlier. A key part of the landscape design is the Riverside Walk, shown here in the lighter green along the river's edge. A continuous experience which link 4 green fingers with different characters extending out towards the existing residential areas to the west. All with green space as a lead priority, they are nonetheless designed so that they have their own character and sense of place. And within these different characters, key destinations are also embedded that also reflect the character of these spaces. The different focuses for the landscape are on community in the southern finger, water and heritage within the central green finger, and a woodland and nature focus within the northern green fingers. It's also important to note that we are looking at existing landscape improvements beyond the site boundary, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, to improve connections into and the landscape and ecology within existing built up areas. Thank you. Next slide. The River Walk gives a real opportunity, and this is a plan which shows how this could be realised. It can give a feel for what the walk experience could be along this side of the river, which will be a new path linking north to south. As part of the public consultation, which we were given feedback on, one of the comments was, or a few of the comments were regarding places to sit and enjoy the riverside and be part of the natural setting. We would look to include these in the design and in the design code so that these would be incorporated. Also, there was feedback regarding leisure space, both for adults and children, and people of all ages to enjoy the riverside. We were also given feedback that keeping trees and integrating new planting was a key priority, and this is part of our landscape framework master plan. Also, community spaces and perhaps community orchards or gardens can form a key part of the open space and the public realm. Thank you. This slide just shows some sections, some typical sections, showing the idea of the buffer between the riverway and the built frontage. As part of the gateways strategy, and the top section shows how the pump house could be relocated within this area with a good offset to the river's edge, ensuring that space is given and the river's edge can be accessed and utilised. The lower section shows the river section further up, also showing how trees and planting can be incorporated to really give a good natural buffer between built form and the river. Thank you. This slide goes into a bit more detail as to how the gateway could work. This is showing the gateway at the southern edge around the existing pump house and how it could be incorporated for community use, both indoors and outdoors, with visual connections to the river. Slowing vehicles here is a priority, as mentioned in the SMC section, and also maintaining the ecological corridor down the riverway is important. Using the external space for community events and linking the usage of the pump house are good placemaking opportunities. So a real community asset could be born out of this southern area of the site. Thank you. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the plans shown here are just indicative and illustrative, showing how these green fingers could start to be articulated into spaces that can be used and enjoyed. Connecting Belfield's Road Gateway and the Weyfield Primary School to the Riverside and the River Walk is a key priority, and incorporating learning activities, community spaces, gardens, orchards, and green open spaces within this area. A lot of this came from the feedback that you gave us, and we see it as a really important element to get into the design code for this area. Thank you. Next slide. The central green finger, the key principles are around creating a water and a heritage theme to try and tell the story of this site and the riverway and journeys by water. We're proposing that a focal water feature could form part of the local centre area within the village heart space, and this could demonstrate the theme and create a real gathering point to be enjoyed. Also, small integrated opportunities for children to play along some of the pedestrian routes as they go on their journeys along these green links, all embedded within a water theme. So we really see that the sustainable urban drainage could form quite a lot of the external landscape in these areas. Thank you. Finally, the two northern green fingers. we've allocated a woodland and nature character. This would be working with the existing woodland to create a landscape experience that's really embedded in the existing place, incorporating woodland play and activity as a key element. And this was something that came from a lot of the public consultation feedback. The planting design and specifications would be native-led and really embedding ecology enhancements into these areas. Providing an appropriate gateway to and from the proposed sang is also incredibly important to the north, and I'll talk about that more in a slide upcoming. Thank you. Next slide. So a place for wildlife is a key element of the landscape design here. Ecology is a key priority for the landscape proposals, and the Riverway corridor is a really important asset within the wider green infrastructure. And much work has been done to protect this corridor within the design and ensure that this wider green infrastructure is connected in and protected. Thank you. Next slide, please. Finally, we talked a little bit about the sang earlier, and I just wanted to reiterate that the connection into the sang is a key part of this scheme in order to create that north-south connectivity. But I also want to reassure you that any works that happen in this area will be done sensitively and appropriately. For instance, through the area of existing trees and replanted ancient woodland, we would look to use pathways such as cell web type paths that can be laid over existing root protection areas in order not to damage existing trees. Thank you. I'll now pass over to Rebecca to talk about character areas.
Thank you, Phil. So the last set of slides here talk through a little bit more of the detail of the new neighbourhood as it comes forward. Of course, with an outline application, we aren't designing any buildings in detail, but what we will be doing is setting out within our design and access statement certain character areas, which you can see here. And then I will also take you through the design code, which is a document capturing some other quality aspects of the proposals and are a really good way of controlling development quality as it comes forward over phases. So the character area plan here shows that we are exploring the idea of 4 different character areas. So these really are where you have subtle differences in design and through the scale and types of buildings, variations in materials and details. And we're suggesting here that the southern area is called the Heritage Quarter around the existing pump house, where we might draw some references from that retained building and from the sort of historic uses of the site. The blue area, where we have the more flattered development set back from the navigation route, is called Riverside Wharf. And we think here we might draw some inspiration from Riverside and Wharf type buildings, where you can see a precedent there of gable fronted buildings facing towards the water, and some of the references with metalwork and the architectural cues from Wharfside buildings to really create a distinctive character within the heart of the new neighbourhood. The garden mews area shown in green broadly covers the area where the existing allotments are, and we thought there could be a nice story here of retaining fruit trees and growing areas within the streets and really creating a range of landscape-led mews streets in this part of the development. And then to the north, the green lanes, where we have a slightly finer grain of new housing coming forward, where we've also got more of the existing trees that we're obviously seeking to retain and use those to inform a more woodland character as you come in off Slyfield Green. And that's the top image on the right there as an example of how that might come forward. So these character areas are explained in more detail in our design and access statement, which will accompany the outline planning application. Next, please. The other document that we'll produce, which Sarah referred to, is called a design code. And this really sets out both mandatory requirements and also design guidance to forthcoming house builders as they might take on parcels of development in the future here. This drawing is called a regulatory plan, and what this seeks to do is capture the key aspects of the design code in a single drawing to make sure it's easy to understand and that it's easy to also to police going forward. And this drawing controls the layouts of streets and spaces. It controls the frontages to development parcels, and it also makes sure that landscape gets delivered in the right places. So you can see, for example, green dashed lines which are showing indicative pedestrian cycle routes through from the Weyfield neighbourhood down to the river. You can see also areas of dash lines which show different kinds of building frontages to ensure that, for example, we have sensitive frontages addressing the way navigation and onto sensitive areas of landscape, that those are softened so that they have gaps between them and that there is permeability between the development parcels as they come forward. We also have the areas shown with the dashed black circles, which we call kind of key groupings, for example, around the pump house, and the design code would set out quite more detailed design guidance about how that piece of the new neighbourhood might come forward, setting out things like the approach to silhouette and roofscape, the approach to building materials, and also elevational detail. So we'll have certain parts of the master plan that will be coded in more detail because ultimately they're more important in determining that sense of place. Also worth mentioning is the coding that will occur along the boundary with the existing properties. There'll be a particular section in the design code that will police and code those edge conditions to ensure that development has a sensitive setback, and that we address things like overlooking distances and retention of existing trees and landscape buffers in those locations. Next, please. An example then of a page of what the design code might look like, and of course this is very much still work in progress, but what we aim to do is make sure these documents are really easy to use, and we'll have boxes like these shown here in yellow with an M, meaning this is mandatory requirements that come forward, and then other aspects of the code which are guidance and it will help future house builders to ensure that they build new homes in keeping with the code. And you can see on the box on the left, this is an example of the heritage quarter towards the south of the site, where we'll be coding appropriate building heights, appropriate roof forms, material specifications for the sort of primary materials to make sure they pick up on the same kind of materials as the pump house. And then the drawing on the right shows the approach to frontages. So we set out key types of frontages and we draw those out in section to make sure that there's the right proportion of overlooking, that building frontages address streets rather than turning their backs to them. And also in key locations such as around the pump house, that particular attention is given to new buildings that sit alongside retained heritage assets such as this one. Next, please. We then have a series of artist impressions, which hopefully help to give you a bit of a flavour of what the new urban village could look like in the future. As I say, we're not designing the detail of these buildings, but it gives you an impression of, for example, in this one, how the way navigation edge might look in the future. So this is from the existing towpath, which you can see in the foreground, looking across the way of navigation to the new built edge, where we've got individual family homes with gaps between, and actually not shown on this illustration are the much wider gaps where you have the views through the green corridors and connecting up towards the Weyfield neighbourhood to the west. So 2- and 3-storey homes here, and then just off to the right, slightly taller buildings around the new local centre. Next, please. This view then is taken on the site itself, looking along the way navigation to give you a sense of the setbacks. As Phil showed at the sections, these range from sort of 20 to 30 metres from the bank along to the housing that is now fronting the way navigation. And you can see here the opportunity for the new foot and cycle route lined with sort of doorstep play areas. And what we want to make sure as well is that homes are addressing that new public route to make sure it's safe and well surveyed, and that it's an attractive route, though of course with things like sensitive lighting approaches and things which will all come forward in the detailed design. Next, please. And then this is an artist's impression of the southern end of the site as you come in from the Woking Road, with the retained pump house shown on the left, and opportunities then to create some attractive public realm that connects that pump house across to the the bank along the waterside, where we've got landscape and amenity, to ensure that this is a pedestrian priority kind of space. And we've been exploring the opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, for community uses within the pump house. We think this could be a fantastic community asset, from a range and serving a range of different functions. And of course, in the outline planning application, there will be a basket of use classes applied to this to give us ultimate flexibility for a range of things that might come forward, given this is a number of years off being delivered. But you can see here the potential arrival from the Woking Road, and a fantastic opportunity to create open views onto the water and through into the new neighbourhood, and really celebrate that amazing sense of arrival that at the moment, of course, no one can enjoy from this side of the way navigation, and just from the towpath on the opposite side at the moment. Next, please. And then we've been exploring as well, and I know that there was quite a lot of questions in the previous consultation about the local centre and what uses might come forward here. And this is something we'd really appreciate people's views on, so we can better understand perhaps what local needs there are and what things might be missing at the moment in the existing surrounding neighbourhoods. So the little plan at the top there is showing our illustrative layout of the local centre buildings and the water body that Phil referred to as part of our water story through the green route there. And then on the bottom right, you can see a little 3D axonometric of that little part of the plan. And then the list on the left are some of the uses that we've been exploring, from a new convenience store, so a new food store shown in the orange, on the addressing that new square, showing where the number 1 is. And then we thought there are opportunities for some local retail, for potentially a Riverside cafe shown in the little pavilion building in the turquoise colour. And then also potentially a new children's nursery, and also a health centre integrated with a new community centre. And of course, there is also the existing Aggie Club to be rehoused onto the site as well. So a whole range of different opportunities that could come forward in the local centre around this piece of well-designed public realm that really is an opportunity to enjoy the river and the views out beyond, and create a really strong sense of place within the heart of the new neighbourhood. Next, please. Here then is a visual of potentially what that new local centre could look like going forward. So this is a view looking out towards the Wey navigation, and you can see in the foreground some of that water-led landscape as part of our sustainable urban drainage strategy, but making sure there is sort of permanent water here as well, to create a strong sense of place and interest and amenity space for existing and new residents. And then you can see, sort of looking into the middle of the image, the opportunity for ground floor commercial areas and retail to serve this neighbourhood and the wider area as well. Next, please. And then an artist's impression of the new community green. So this is taken from the Weyfield Primary School, looking down the green finger towards the Wey navigation, with new homes addressing a play area and also a community growing area off to the left of the image. We think this could create a really strong sense of arrival, and also very much serve the existing primary school and the children who are attending that, and help to really sort of stitch these the new and the existing communities together, and provide a fantastic community asset at this entrance off of Belfields Road. Next, please. So I'll hand over back to Joanna at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks very much to all the questions that have come through. We won't have time to go through them all this evening. So what I've tried to do is pick 4 or 5 questions that try and reflect some of the comments and concerns that have been raised this evening. In terms of any other questions and comments, as usual, we will respond to those in writing. Please bear with us while we pull that information together. If colleagues are ready, so Phil, one for you. Have you assessed the impact on views from the AONB? That is from Merrow down, from where Slyfield is already very prominent?
There's a separate landscape and visual impact assessment being conducted, and the key views are going to be looked at and assessed in terms of that. In terms of the landscape buffering and screening that can happen, there's obviously flexibility in terms of how we plant trees, where we plant them, in order to create screening and create that buffering where required, and that will be led by the landscape and the visual character assessment as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Matt, one for you. How will you prevent road sinking like on Slyfield? Is this a risk for building development too?
And this might actually be more for Stuart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say it might actually be more
this one.
So I touched on earlier about the geotechnical investigations that we've been doing. They're not purely for contamination, they're also to determine the ground makeup and the ground bearing capacity. So we use that data to then feed into piling design for buildings, foundation design for buildings, and road pavement design. So we are aware of the type of ground on this site, and the engineering solutions will be factored into accordingly to do that. In terms of highways, and to stop things sinking, they tend to be built on road stone and demolished road stone, which will be processed on site, but also via a variety of geotextiles and geogrids. So we will be ensuring that these have the proper life expectancies.
Thanks, Stuart. Rebecca, how does the new development relate and connect with the existing Weyfield community?
Yeah, so we've spent a long time assessing and understanding the existing built edge to the new neighbourhood, and our design and access statement will set out very clearly the different responses that we're proposing along the edge. So in some cases, buildings, existing homes back onto the boundary, and others they have a side relationship. And in other areas, you have parking courts, or you have the green areas that abut the boundary. And what we've been exploring is a range of different solutions, such that where we do have properties backing on, new properties would back onto those, so that's a sensitive relationship. But also where there's opportunities to create new connections for the existing residents to be able to then come through the new neighbourhood and enjoy all of the assets, and particularly the way navigation corridor, that they can do that quickly and easily. So we've been looking at land ownerships in some of those areas to see what connections are deliverable. But ultimately, we want to create a really, a good responsive edge and create strong connections where they're deliverable, but also create sensitive offsets where there's mature trees or there might be overlooking issues. And then I touched on the relationship with the primary school already in the drawings and the work that we've been doing there.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Matt, any news about Woodland Road benefits?
Yeah, so well, as we presented last time, Woodlands Road is obviously going to be one of the secondary access routes into the site. Now that we have opened up the southern access point, there will be less traffic than I think we originally presented using those roads. But in terms of benefits to Woodlands Road, we are going to be upgrading the junction with Woking Road, and we will present plans for that next time. We are also looking to improve landscaping along the road where possible, and crucially, I think we are looking at, from the issue that was highlighted last time about industrial related parking along the road. So as I presented earlier, we're looking at resolving that where possible through putting in a kind of either a permitting or parking restriction scheme.
Thank you. Final question. The suds fingers look great, but the green corridor along the way looks far too thin to be an effective buffer. Phil, is that one for you?
It possibly looks like that on the plan, but as I think showed in the sections, we've respected a minimum distance corridor from the way navigation edge, and we think that there is a sufficient space there to get good planting in, to get good roots in, and a good relationship between the the water's edge and the built frontage. So I think when you look at the plans in scale, it may look a bit thin, but we think that there is enough there to get a good landscape buffer in the space.
Thank you. I'm sorry we don't have any more time for any more questions. Thank you to colleagues for putting their webcams on and for replying to the ones that we have done. And as I said, we'll circulate responses as soon as we can to every other comment and concern that's been raised with us. Joe, can we just go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so we are still keen to get your feedback. You will know, I hope, that the previous 5 consultations are also still available on the project website, so please do take some time to have a look at those, as well as the one from this evening, which will be available tomorrow. There's a number of ways of coming back to us. You can email us, you can phone somebody, you can phone one of us at Curtin & Co. There is the option of the feedback form on the Weyside Urban Village project website, or you can write to us at a free post address. Please do let us know, or let us know if any of your neighbours want any of the material in on paper. We're very happy to provide that. Please let us have your comments by Wednesday, the 28th of October, so that we have time to prepare for the event on the 4th of November. Joe, if we could just turn to the final slide, please. So just to let you know what the next steps are, as I said, there is the final presentation on Wednesday, the 4th of November at the same time, 6:30. You can sign up to participate at the project website in the usual way. Towards the end of November, the team will be submitting the planning application for Weyside Urban Village to Guildford Borough Council. And early next year, the council's planning committee will be making a decision on the planning application. And then more detailed reserved matters applications will come forward over the course of the coming years, and residents will have an opportunity to comment on those. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for taking part and for your questions and comments. And we hope to see you again on the 4th of November. And please do take 2 minutes to complete the feedback form at the close of this presentation. Thank you.